Thank you for that introduction, and thank you all for attending. So today I'll be going over Business Capability Maps, a practical guide for enterprise architects. And just to give a bit more introduction, my name is Karina Ahmed, and I'm a senior software consultant with Avolution. I've been with Avolution for 8 years and have had the opportunity to work with many enterprise architecture teams across many industries. So this experience has shown the importance of business capabilities to an effective enterprise architecture practice, and I'm excited to share some of these lessons with you today. I also wanted to give you a brief background about Avolution and Abacus in case you aren't familiar with us. We are an enterprise architecture tools company and have been a leading tool in the industry for the past 22 years. Today, our software suite Abacus is being used by thousands of people all around the world. We've also been reviewed by a number of independent analysts and review boards, and we're very proud to be leaders in the Gartner Magic Quadrants and critical capabilities. Today, we will talk through how you can build a business capability map that suits your business and leverage it to build buy-in by creating consensus around core business advantages and functions, provide visibility by showing how capabilities connect to applications, processes, and technology infrastructure, identify opportunities by using capabilities to provide context and a business perspective on other analysis, and chart your transformation journey with roadmaps and process models driven by capability gaps. Let's start by looking at how we can build buy-in by using capabilities to create consensus around core business advantages and functions. We will examine how to build a capability map that resonates across your organization and promotes common language. First, we have to ask the basic question, what are business capabilities? As the open group states, a business capability represents the ability for a business to do something. Keeping that definition in mind, we should think about business capabilities not only in terms of what our business does now, but also what it can do in the future. It's also important to remember that when we are talking about capabilities, we are talking about the what, the thing the business can do. The capability itself does not specify how this is done, who is involved, or which technology is used. Instead, the capability map serves as the point of common understanding from which we can understand the connected processes, people, and technology that actually supports those capabilities to allow them to happen and enable them. By identifying what the business does, we are building common understanding. The business capability map helps us to see how work that might otherwise feel disjointed across different domains and areas of the business, we can then see through that business capability map how that is actually serving a common purpose. So let's take an example. We might have a scenario where an internal IT team could be focused on the processes and resources involved in setting up a new employee laptop. And they have their set of processes, people, resources, technologies, etc., to do that. Meanwhile, the security team might be working through their own sets of processes of setting up appropriate access for a new employee, while HR supports the completion of onboarding paperwork and legal compliance processes. Now, there's a lot of different things happening here, but it requires identification of a capability, employee onboarding in this case, to recognize that these people, processes, and technologies are working toward the same end result. A recognition of this will enable collaboration and shared thinking, and it allows us to see beyond just the steps in front of us and understand how this fits into a wider strategy. For this to be effective, we must make sure that the business capability map suits our organization in particular. Having a capability map that does not reflect the reality of your organization will not lead to insight and is likely to be quickly ignored and discarded. In order to produce a business capability map that will actually resonate, we can leverage one of the following approaches: top-down, bottom-up, reference architecture, and hybrid. So we're going to take a look at each of these in a bit more detail. When we take the top-down approach to business capability maps, we are starting with how executives view and understand the business. And this approach tends to be a bit more strategy forward. So we're generally going to be talking with senior business leaders and defining 20 to 30 of the highest level business capabilities, which are going to be tied very closely to business strategy. We can then take that information and further decompose it into lower levels. When we're doing this, some of the questions that we might want to ask include: what are the main functions of the business? That can get that conversation started. We can also ask about the top strategies of the business and what capabilities they perceive as supporting those top strategies. It's also good to ask about the key goals moving forward and the capabilities needed to support those goals. So we want to ask the sort of similar questions in different ways to understand how the business is perceived, what key functions are understood, and what key functions are a part of the goals and strategies moving forward. The bottom-up approach is based less on how the business is perceived at the top and more about how the business operates currently, from which we can extrapolate information about the business capability map. This approach can be time-consuming, but it can lead to an accurate reflection of what will actually be relevant across the business. To go about defining the business capability model in this approach, you might start with some existing documents on business processes, organization charts, or even solution architectures. And you can build on this to draw from day-to-day operations and domain experts. You can ask these domain experts different questions to start to understand what capabilities are being served. So some questions that you might want to consider asking include: what larger function does this particular process serve? Or you could ask about organizational units and what functions they provide. You could also ask about what business value a technology provides. In this way, you can extrapolate what capabilities are being supported. Both the top-down and bottom-up approaches are time-intensive. Using a reference framework can save a significant amount of time compared to the top-down and bottom-up approaches. Various reference frameworks exist. Some of them are also industry specific. So one example of that is with the buy-in model, which is focused on the banking industry. Meanwhile, there are many other frameworks that have both industry specific and general versions. So BizBock is an example of this. It has a general capability model, the top level of which is pictured here, but it also has industry-specific versions, several of them. And APQC's process classification framework is similar. For this framework, oftentimes the top levels are used for capability modeling. And again, this has a general version and industry-specific versions. Leveraging any framework, any reference framework, will save you considerable time and efforts. But if you specifically leverage an industry framework, that will likely get you closer to a business capability map that suits your organization. A hybrid approach can be a great way to save time with a reference model while building it to the specifics of your organization. The hybrid approach will often look like starting with a reference framework. So that's your foundation, and then customizing it. And that customization can happen with both top-down insights in terms of what functions the business has, what strategy we have, but it can also incorporate bottom-up insights. So understanding how this relates to the organization, the processes, what value is actually being delivered. This hybrid approach is probably the most common approach that I've seen Abacus users take. And if you do want to take the hybrid approach, you will need to make sure that you're leveraging a tool that supports this level of flexibility and doesn't require you to stick to an out-of-the-box capability model. You will also want to make sure that the tool that you are using allows you to easily produce visuals from the customized model. Regardless of which approach you take, there are some good practices to keep in mind. One is to use nouns, not verbs, when naming capabilities. This relates to that idea of capabilities being the what rather than the who or the how or the which. So when we're talking about using nouns, not verbs, we want to switch around our language so that it is stated in terms of a noun. So for example, rather than saying developing vision and strategy, which sounds more like a process, we want to say vision and strategy development. Similarly, we might say products and services development, customer service management, etc. This helps us to remember that we are trying to use capabilities, not products, not solutions, not departments, not processes, not technologies, etc. It can be really easy for these non-capabilities to sneak their way into our capability models because it's oftentimes how we're thinking about things on a day-to-day basis. But we really want to make sure that we're keeping our business capability model to just capabilities. By sticking to capabilities, just the what of the business and not getting into all of the other details, we are building that common understanding so that we can then link things to those capabilities. We absolutely want to use our capability model to understand product solutions, departments, etc. But the more neutral our capability model is regarding those other things, the better we will be able to do that. Now, we also do often show core and enabling capabilities and separate them out a little bit. So the core capabilities typically refer to what your business is able to do, the value that it provides, kind of its main function as a business or as an organization. While the enabling capabilities, or sometimes they're referred to more like supporting capabilities, they have to do with more kind of general functions that support those core capabilities. So some examples include financial resources management, IT management, HR would also fall into this. And so oftentimes splitting those out can be a good way to understand which ones might be more strategic and which one might be more kind of general. A list of capabilities on its own is not going to get you very far in conversations, even when you follow all of those best principles. So appealing visuals will really go a long way in grabbing your audience's attention. This works best when visuals have layers of meaning incorporated, and especially when they can support drilling in to show more detail. In the example here, we can see that our capabilities are visualized in a diagram in the center. Creating such a diagram from any capability model, no matter how custom, is quick and easy in a tool like Abacus. And the diagram that we see here also layers in additional meaning with heat mapping. The tree map on the side also includes heat mapping and enables users to dynamically drill down to see lower levels of the capability model, as well as supporting components. Charts also enrich this view. Capability models provide value by providing an organizing principle around which we can understand the supporting processes, applications, technologies, and more. Understanding these interdependencies provides value by putting our enterprise in business capability terms. Building these dependencies does not have to be an overwhelming task, and it doesn't need to be undertaken primarily by the enterprise architects. If you are using a holistic enterprise architecture tool, you will be able to democratize building these relationships. They can be built out organically as natural extensions of existing enterprise architecture work. This can look like having application managers fill out the capabilities that their applications support. This will best be supported when capability mapping is incorporated into the rest of the work that you are doing. If the application portfolio is managed in the same toolset where the capabilities are also managed, then the application portfolio manager can select the related capabilities from the same place where they are already working. In an interconnected repository, this builds a relationship that will be visible from the capability perspective as well. Relationships to supporting components can also look like having process modelers or solution architects tie content directly to capabilities from within their diagrams. With a graph database in the backend, incorporating an existing capability onto a diagram means that users are actually creating connections in the data. In this case, relating a process to a capability is actually what's happening, not just in the diagram, but behind the scenes in the data as well. All of these tasks will be made easier if the editable content is exposed in SSO-enabled intuitive web views, such as what we have in Abacus Enterprise. This work enables end-to-end traceability that results in a comprehensive understanding of a capability's dependencies. This can be understood through dynamic drill downs, as well as through more structured reporting. Such reporting can provide a clear view of how and where business functions rely on applications, processes, and technology infrastructure. This visibility can start on a view of the capabilities themselves, with heat mapping based on their underlying dependencies. This might be as simple as heat mapping by count of dependent applications, but could also extend into showing attributed costs, risk, or maturity in the heat map. Drilling in deeper, we can see more details of what actually supports the capability. The drill down example here shows an auto-generated diagram, as well as detailed process and solution views and charts that show more details of the components that support the capability in question. Once we have established the capability model and the dependencies that enable those capabilities, we can use this information to evaluate our current state and find opportunities for improvement. One way that we can leverage capabilities to identify opportunities is by automating technical debt management. Technical debt can be a major issue that inhibits maturing and creates ongoing costs. However, it's often difficult to explain the business implications and to figure out where we actually need to prioritize the reduction of technical debt. An approach we can use is to leverage capabilities to put that technical debt into perspective. If we tie the identification of technical debt to things such as applications, technologies, and even processes, those things that the technical debt directly impacts, we can then attribute information about that technical debt up to the capabilities. This could look like a count or a score. And doing this means that the technical debt can be viewed in terms of which business capabilities are most impacted, which can then help stakeholders to understand it in their terms. This view can also help us to determine which capability is most in need of some work to improve the technical debt situation. And so it can be a starting point for us to focus on reducing that technical debt. Key to this is being able to calculate scores and attribute information up to the capability level. In Abacus, the Visual Algorithm Composer enables no-code aggregations and attributions that work with all data, including custom attributes and custom components. So this opens the door to many options for evaluation, not just with technical debt. In this case, we can actually see an algorithm being run, which carries the technical debt score up to the capabilities, thus heat mapping the capability view that we see on the left. The business capability model can also help us to evaluate other areas of the enterprise architecture. For example, when rationalizing applications, simply comparing the business fit and technical fit scores across the entire landscape of applications generally won't be enough to make determinations about individual applications. Doing this doesn't have enough context and doesn't really allow us to compare similar applications to each other. But we can add in the relationship to capabilities to provide that context. So if applications are mapped to capabilities, we have some initial information on them, we can use the approach of focusing in on a subset of the application portfolio based on what capability they support. And then we can compare those applications to that subset and rate them accordingly, according to their scores and the capability that they support. This approach also benefits from being able to produce scores such as business fit and technical fit scores through the visual algorithm composer. Here we can see the value coming in from that relationship to the capabilities by the ability in this view to actually dynamically filter the entire dashboard based off of which capability we want to focus on. So in this view, we can see that we are focusing in on a single capability, and everything else, all of this other information around these applications, updates to be around that subset. And so now, rather than looking at a disparate set of applications, we are looking at a set of applications that are serving that same capability that can be accurately compared to each other so that we can understand what lifecycle recommendation we should be making. Capability maturity modeling is perhaps the obvious choice for analysis and opportunity setting in a business capability context. The challenge is to assess how the business operates and where we can improve. Well, we want to understand this from the perspective of capabilities. This is an area that is also highly dependent on evaluating dependencies. CMMI's approach to capability maturity emphasizes evaluating the maturity of processes. It can be a challenge to get this information and understand it in light of the capabilities. But by incorporating the business capability model into the rest of enterprise architecture, we can have process owners evaluate their processes in the same workspace where they model them out. And the information can be collated and attributed automatically. By incorporating process evaluation questions into the process components, you can make it so that filling out these details is a natural part of the workflow. This way, filling details can be incorporated into just creating a process flow directly. This is particularly effective when we can control the content of that form. In this example, you can see that the dropdowns for the questions contain details, so the user knows what they are selecting for each level. Additional details regarding the question is included in the tooltip to guide those entering the data. These inputs will then be aggregated together using the visual algorithm composer to produce a process maturity score, and then attributed to the related capabilities to understand the capability maturity. Once we've leveraged capabilities to identify opportunities, we have the ability to transform the business by addressing the gaps. Not only does capability modeling help us to identify opportunities, it also contextualizes transformations, enabling more effective target setting and comparison. Capabilities can be linked to IT architecture components, applications and infrastructure, and data models to provide a holistic view of the enterprise. For example, this dashboard shows how availability improves for the managed customer service capability when we move from current to target states. Looking at this improvement for the capability, which is reflected in the heat map, helps us to understand the change holistically, taking into account not only improvements on individual applications or technologies, but also improvements that result from decommissioning and replacing certain applications and technologies. And this dashboard shows how we can demonstrate the way that a move to the target state will improve capability maturity, increase availability, and decrease cost. Here we see these results in the direct KPI-based current and target state comparison. We also see the path to making these changes reflected in the Gantt chart, where we can see the changes made and the timetable in which they are implemented. Leveraging capability models allows us to identify the opportunities for improvement and clearly demonstrates the value that the roadmap to changes will bring. So to summarize, we want to start by building buy-in. And so this means build a business capability map that suits your organization and visualize the business capabilities. We then want to provide visibility by tying those business capabilities to their supporting processes, people, applications, technologies, etc. Next, we identify opportunities by leveraging business capability dependencies to make technology needs business relevant, contextualize analysis, and improve maturity. Finally, we can chart the transformation journey by using business capabilities as a common thread to compare current and target states. I hope these principles will guide you while leveraging capabilities to build buy-in, provide visibility, identify opportunities, and chart your transformation journey. Thank you for your time today, and I would now like to open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Karina. I appreciate that. Great presentation. There has been quite a lot of chat and quite a lot of questions coming in, so I will handle them in as best an order I can. We'll kick off with, I think, the first one that came into the Q&A channel. The question is, the capability framework on your website is how I expect capabilities to be done. The general reference frameworks, BizBox, etc., are quite bad. XXX management, are they really recommended?
Um, I would say they are recommended. I think there's a lot of insight that goes into them. But I think what is probably the most important thing when selecting a capability framework is to make sure that it is going to be something that resonates for your organization. And so if BizBox doesn't resonate for your organization, as it sounds to be the case here, then it wouldn't be recommended. It wouldn't be the right choice there. So then, if something like APQC resonates, I think that's probably what's pictured most on our website, then that's absolutely what you should go with. So making sure that the capability model is going to be something that is suitable, I'd say, is the top recommendation above anything else.
Okay, I mean, obviously that was one particular person's view of BizBox, I guess. So you mentioned APQC, and there was another question came in relating to that, and you've almost answered it. Basically, would you recommend the APQC process and application framework as reference?
Yeah, and it is kind of a similar answer as you've hinted at. If it is going to be something that is well suited to your business, and sometimes that's a question of, does it need to be something industry specific? Do they have that industry specific model in general? Is this something that aligns to how your organization wants to think about capabilities? And if it does, or if it's 80% of the way there, then that can be a really great foundation. And as we covered, of course, that can be adjusted to suit the specific situation using those top-down and bottom-up approaches to make those adjustments.
Okay, thank you. Going on to another question, what might recommendations be for customers or people who can't afford to fund sophisticated tooling? Is this where you would recommend Archie? And if so, are there any plugins that would help?
That's a good question. I don't think I know a good answer to that. I certainly have worked with customers who have started out doing really good effort in Archie and have then been able to pull that into Abacus and leverage what they've been doing so far. So that does seem to be a good option for still having interconnectedness with a more free tool. But somebody else might have some better insight into some options there.
Okay, so people may wish to plug some of that feedback into the chat channel. Um, Now, there were a couple of questions relating to AI, so I'll capture them. Basically, is Abacus currently using any AI features? And if not, are there any plans for AI in future releases?
Yeah, so we do have an Ask Abacus feature that is uh, a feature that is available now, but is getting a lot of improvements being made to it that is leveraging aspects of machine learning. And so in future releases, there's going to be a lot more that's going to offer, and that we'll be able to have more details on as that's released. So it's definitely something that is on our radar and that we're working to incorporate as we can.
Okay, this one's pretty long, so you might want to just uh, sort of take all of this in. Harry is asking, I want to capture the capabilities of our software development for both IT and business. Currently, we capture the capabilities and applications used by internal/external users as business capabilities and applications. However, IT services are treated as indirect capabilities and are not included under business capabilities. Instead, I'm planning to capture them as tech capabilities and tech products. This means some of the products will be duplicated, such as GitHub, Jira, Visual Studio, etc. What would you recommend?
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a really interesting question. So, it can absolutely be useful to separate out business capabilities and what is being referred to as, I think, both IT services and sort of tech capabilities here. Now, in this case, that kind of goes back to the idea of we want to distinguish between something that is a capability or a function and the actual product or solution that is providing that. So that is also applicable, I would say, in the tech capability space. So if you want to have a tech capability that indicates something like having like collaboration or for software development, then that might be what we call our capability. Or so we're saying like development, collaboration, or something like that. And then we tie GitHub, the product, to that capability. So we can have just a singular um, com- pro- product component for GitHub and then tie it to the capabilities that it supports, whether those are tech or business capabilities. So that would be generally my recommendation, though it sounds like there's a lot of other detail going on in that situation.
Okay, thank you. Here's one that came in the chat channel. In Abacus, can you create your own ERD categories, e.g., GCP was shown in the demo?
Yep, absolutely. So Abacus allows for full customization and configuration. So regardless of what you use as a framework for your core backbone of the meta model, and also regardless of what framework you're using for like a capability reference framework, you can always add in customization. So that could be a custom field if you want to just capture information about GCP in a custom field. That can also look like expanding it in other ways for custom component types. Of course, if you're just drawing out an ERD model in Abacus, then of course it's going to have whatever you need to capture there. And importantly, doing those customizations does not at all take away from your ability to visualize and analyze. Abacus as a tool is totally neutral to that. So it's going to be able to incorporate and leverage all of that um, along with anything that you pulled from an existing framework.
Excellent. I just have a quick shout out to, I believe you got some Avolution colleagues on the chat channel. If those guys out there can help with some of the chat questions that are coming in, because they're going to be way more questions than you're going to be able to handle here. And I know there's some discussion going on there. So thank you to Avolution colleagues who are handling some of the questions coming in on chat. Um, Let me move on to others. There was another business versus technical capabilities question. I think you've covered that. Um, there's one here. The presentation mentions using capabilities for building common understanding. How can this be built or sustained? How do you get people to actually reference the capability model in order for it to serve that purpose?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So, I think a big part of that is making sure that that capability model becomes part of day to day and something that people can reference, even those that are not necessarily part of like a strategy team or part of the enterprise architecture team. So, a really big part of that is having really accessible reporting. So, for example, having like web pages or dashboards in Abacus's case where there are unlimited read-only viewers that can access that page. That means that having those read-only viewers being unlimited means that those dashboards can be really incorporated into day to day, so that the view that has capabilities can also be the view that users go to reference what the step is in the process that they're doing or to reference what application they should be using for a certain task. So if they can build in enterprise architecture for those different pieces of key information into the day to day, then that's giving a way to also provide information about capabilities in that day to day so that they can see when they're looking for an application, they can see, oh, it's actually going to be easier if I search for this application based off of the capability that I'm supporting, or oh, I can actually see that this process that I'm doing already is supporting this capability. And that helps to build out that common understanding because it becomes that common reference point. And it can also be something that is helpful for starting conversations across domains when we're saying we need to find some common ground here or see how these processes fit together. This all fits into this capability. So starting the conversation there will also go a long way.
Excellent, thank you. I've had a couple of questions come in about this presentation and whether the recording and the slide deck will be available. The answer to that is yes. We all of our sponsored webinars are posted on the Open Group Library. There's no charge for that, obviously. So if you wish to access it on demand, it'll be posted very early next week, certainly by Tuesday at the latest. So that'll be the recording we have here as well as the full slide deck. So yes, you can access this afterwards. I'll just move on. How does Abacus capture the data dimension of a business capability? I'm not referring to data used by Abacus to register and model a business capability, but rather the data used / manipulated in a business capability.
Okay, so it sounds like talking about kind of information architecture and how that ties in. Yeah, so that is very commonly tied into capabilities, and I did um, uh, I didn't reference that very much through the presentation and focus more on other areas. But yeah, absolutely. So we can have capabilities. They could be tied directly to something like a subject area or a data entity to see how that information architecture space fits into the capability. So we could have that direct relationship and understand, again, capabilities tied to those pieces of data that can also help with, if we're looking at governance, privacy, et cetera, questions with those data entities. Tying that to capabilities as well can be quite insightful. And that's another thing where we can aggregate that up or attribute it up to the capability level. This could also be happening in an indirect way. So it might be that it's easier or more sustainable to focus on relationships between capabilities and processes and applications exclusively, but then those processes and applications could have direct ties to data, whether it's databases, data entities, data fields, subject areas, etc. Um, and because of the way that we can have relationships working in Abacus and the way we can have attributions and visuals, we'd still be able to see that relationship. So in a drill down visual, we'd be able to go from the capability to the process or application and then down to that information level. And in the same way, if we have an algorithm where we want to understand what percentage of a capabilities um, data entities are restricted access, that's still something that we could attribute up to the capability, even if it were through indirect connections. So that would be up to you. Abacus as a tool supports direct relationships, indirect. So, the approach that you would take for that would also be based on what's going to be realistic for you to sustain, just in terms of keeping the model up to date.
Great, thank you. There are a huge number of questions coming in with relation to specifics about Abacus. I don't think we're going to be able to handle all of those here now. I would advise people, obviously, that Corinna's given a comms link there. There's also a QR code for getting an Abacus demo, and I believe at the beginning there was a QR code for an upcoming EA virtual event from Avolution. So there's a bunch of stuff out there, guys. I will get all these questions passed on as well to your team, and anybody who's selected when they register for this event that they'd like to get more information from the sponsors, I'm sure Avolution will be contacting you directly as well. I'll just try and take a couple more. Are there collaboration features so that data within Abacus Enterprise Architect can be attested by the data owners across the organization?
There are some ways to incorporate approvals and promotions to production. So Abacus certainly does have some options for doing that. We also try and make sure that a lot of the information in the model is protected using permissions that can be controlled at quite a granular level. So making sure that everyone is making only the changes that they're supposed to be making is another way that we approach that issue.
Okay. Okay, in Avolution Abacus, is it possible for us to make a relationship between modeling language such as Archimate with UML or Archimate with BPMN? If yes, how do you implement that in Abacus?
Yeah, that's very common to do, to have sort of a hybrid framework approach. And so that's something that it can be done just simply in the UI, where basically you would pull kind of one framework into the other, and you can choose sort of the point at which you want it to hinge, and this could be multiple points. Now, Archimate and BPMN, that's a very common one. So what that oftentimes looks like is having kind of Archimate as the starting point, and then incorporating in BPMN, and oftentimes that means merging the process components from BPMN with the business process components in Archimate, so that on the Archimate side, you might be modeling how the business process fits in with the kind of end-to-end that Archimate shows. And then you can drill into that and see the business process modeling approach that BPMN supports. So it doesn't have to look exactly like that, but that is kind of a common approach for that kind of question when we do want to incorporate multiple frameworks together.
Okay, there's one other mapping question. Is there mapping between Abacus out of the box meta model and ServiceNow's CSDM, Common Services Data Model, for integration of the tool?
Yeah, so Abacus does have an out-of-the-box integration with ServiceNow. Our ServiceNow Sync feature allows you to map component types and relationships and properties in Abacus to ServiceNow. Um, the specific mapping to their CSDM is not all populated out of the box, but we do have many users who pull in significant portions of the ServiceNow Common Service data model into Abacus. And really we're focusing on, kind of pulling in from ServiceNow what is relevant for the enterprise architecture work.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll probably make this the last one. I know there have been a lot coming in, and as I said, I see your colleagues are handling quite a few of those in chat, but we will send them all on to you afterwards. So this is a specific one about somebody's business. If my business has many lines of business, it says here, like insurance, sales, medical appointments, management, how many maps should I have? Maybe one general map and many specific maps? Question. So,
Yeah, this can definitely be a tricky one, but it is one that I run across quite frequently. So a lot of times, it is kind of a common business capability map, but it's sort of being implemented to different degrees for different lines of the business. So a lot of times, what we can do is we can make it so that we're not duplicating the entire capability map, but instead we're having some different properties or fields on those capabilities that allow us to have different like maturity ratings or other scores depending on the line of business. This can also extend into the connection. So, for example, one line of business might use one application for a capability, and another line of business might use a different application for that same capability. And we can build in that distinction with that line of business based off of the connections themselves. So that's oftentimes the approach that we can take rather than having to replicate the capability model. Another approach that we can take is distinguishing very clearly between those like core capabilities and the enabling capabilities, where we want to have a common set of enabling capabilities, but maybe we have different sets of kind of core capabilities that are specific to those different lines of business. So I would want to understand more of kind of how distinct those core capabilities are across those lines of business. But those are some of the kind of common approaches that I've seen users take in order to avoid duplicating their entire capability model across each business line.
excellent. Thank you. I think for the sake of time, we will probably call it a day there.